Hey guys, welcome to the Kane Audio vlog. It is Friday, which means it's time for another Ask Me Anything. Usual rules apply. Comment me any question below this video and I'll get back to you next week. Before I start house admin, I'm wearing a Kane Audio hoodie. Mine arrived and it is super comfy, super warm. It's kind of, I don't know what that is, super soft, whatever it is inside. So I'm really pleased with those. You can order yours now. There'll be a link below this video, which will be shop.kaneaudio.com. If you do order anything from the merch shop, then please do send me a selfie or whatever, because that'd be awesome. Other house admin, I don't think there is any. It's been a pretty normal week, just carrying on with usual work. Yeah, don't think there's anything of real mention, so straight on with the questions. Right, last week's Deadly Custard, Socket and C, high five. I can't wait to see how the synth turns out. If you need anyone to test it in Ableton, hint hint. I might do, actually, we'll see. So at the moment it's kind of, well, it started off as a bit of an experiment for myself, just to kind of learn how to do it, really. I haven't done much on it this week because I haven't had the time, but the last thing I did was experimenting with a couple of different filters and trying to put a switch between different types of filters. So it's going to be a fairly, I want to say, standard subtractive synth. If there is, I don't think there's going to be anything particularly special or surprising in there, but I think we all agree that most of the time, the biggest feature of a synth is the built-in presets. So hopefully I'll be able to do some good ones with that, because I'll have built it from the ground up. Hopefully I'll know what I need to get a certain sound and whatever. So yeah, I still haven't decided what I'm going to even do with it at the end. Like I say, it was a bit of an experiment for my own sort of personal gain to begin with, and I'm guessing the best way is to port it into Reactor, because Reactor Player is a free download that most people have anyway, and it's PC and Mac and Ableton, Bitwig, whatever. It's a pretty amenable synth. So yeah, I don't know, I'll probably either give it away for free or maybe a couple of dollars or something like that. I don't know, I haven't decided yet, but we'll see how it goes. Hey, let's see if I finish it first. Cavocade, cheers Dom, great AMA. You have a knack for explaining esoteric or complex concepts in a way that just makes sense. LMAO, at Timmy Mallet. Blast from the past. Password should have been Wackaday. Yeah, you're right. My childhood hero, Timmy Mallet. Anyway, Socket, high five. PS, I'm looking forward to hearing what Stoic turns into. As I mentioned on Facebook, love the name. Marcus Aurelius would approve. Yeah. PPS, with reference to the loss leader discussion, sure, that's a possibility. So the loss leader thing was, I don't know if it was Cavocade or someone had said that it looks like Apple are stopping, was it the Mac Pro and the iMac or something? And I was saying, even if they're not profitable, it's one of those things that has an Apple logo on, so it's kind of a loss leader, but it leads to more sales. However, if the iMac and MacBook division is a loss leader, it's a bloody big expense. If I was on the Apple board of directors, I'd be wanting to see clear evidence that the unprofitable products were having a disproportionate, i.e. profitable effect on sales of iPhones, iPads and whatever else. Otherwise I'd be pretty unsentimental about halting production. The fact that a small subset of my customers would be left without their preferred hardware would barely figure in my decision, unless it caused a significant hit to my bottom line. I don't disagree with what you're saying. However, I think we might be underestimating the amount of iMac and MacBook users there are out there. When I first bought my first MacBook, which was the first MacBook, and I think they'd just stopped doing the G4, so that was about 2005, something like that. It was, you know, there was me and I think I knew one other person that had a Mac laptop. Nowadays, everywhere I go, everyone's got a Mac laptop. So I think sales are pretty big if you compare it to how it used to be. It may not be as profitable as, for example, the iPhone, iPod, whatever sector, but I think the numbers are still pretty astronomical. It's a $1 trillion company. So there's that, and also, and this is one of my biggest bugbears that I've had with Apple for the past few years. It never used to bother me. They've always had this closed environment. If you owned an iPhone, it was easy to synchronize with iTunes and whatever. But if you didn't want to use iTunes, you wanted to use another MP3 player or whatever, that was always a nightmare. So they've kind of tied you in, and a lot of people, particularly friends of mine who are in creative media, if they were PC users, they'd sort of scoff at everyone with a Mac because they go, ah, you're tied in, and you know, you have to use iTunes, and you have to use Apple Mail, and you have to use this, that and the other. And whilst that was true, it was never a problem for me, because I liked the Apple environment. And I felt like every time they released a new piece of software, it just worked, and every time a new piece of hardware came out, it just worked with everything, and that was great. However, over the last 5 years, I think that's really declined, and I think the stability issues are a bit of a nightmare now. So I'll give you an example. In fact, you've all witnessed, for those who followers of mine, you've all witnessed this video getting out later and later over the last few weeks. Admittedly, my Mac Tower is really old, but up until 3-4 weeks ago, Final Cut Pro was running absolutely fine. I've since downloaded another piece of software, and whilst it's not particularly quick because I'm on an old Mac, it's far quicker than Final Cut Pro, which leads me to believe, because I'm on an old Mac, they've stopped the updates of Final Cut Pro at 10.3.4, and 10.4 is out now for anyone who has a new Mac, and 10.3.4 has just, it's obviously been throttled because I can't find, you know, I've taken apart all the hardware, I've run hardware tests, everything seems to be running as it was 3-4 weeks ago, which again is not great, but it was fine, it all worked. And now all of a sudden background rendering is just stupendously slow. So I'm led to believe, and I could be totally wrong here, but I'm led to believe that Apple must be throttling it to try and push people to upgrade. The same happened with my iPhone when I had an iPhone 6. All of a sudden the new iPhone came out, my iPhone 6 started slowing right down. They actually admitted to that one, claiming it was for battery protection. Don't really know how true that is, although it does make technical sense. But the point is that, and this is the point I'm trying to make, I'll get there in the end, is that with that enclosed environment of software, hardware, everything just works, that's not a problem. There's no reason to leave. Whereas when you start getting stability issues and you start getting macOS updates that don't quite do what you wanted anymore, or they run differently or whatever, it pushes me away. So for example, when the iPhone 8 and X or 10 came out, I saw the astronomical prices. I looked at my iPhone 6 and thought, well, they're throttling this, otherwise it was working just fine. And that led me to go, well, why would I spend £1,000 on a new phone, and I was out of contract and I was only paying a nominal amount for my monthly tariff. because I was out of contract. So it led me to think, well, why would I just quadruple my bill to get what is essentially the same phone just a little bit faster in terms of what I'm going to use it for. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying the iPhone X is overpriced, because it's a laptop in your pocket, and that's great. But for the things I was using my phone for, I didn't need all of those extra features, so I couldn't justify the money, and that led me to go, I'll get a Samsung, which I hated for the first couple of months, and then it's normal again. The same goes for Final Cut Pro, which I mentioned has now started slowing right down. Well, I've moved over to DaVinci Resolve, and that's why you'll notice that last week's video and this week's has a slightly different colour to it, because I'm just getting used to that. And also note that DaVinci Resolve works on PC as well, so if I do want to move over to PC, I was kind of tied into the whole Apple environment, and I'm now having to break free because they're not providing the goods. So I've gone on this huge Apple rant, and this is a music production vlog, so I apologise, but I think this is true for musicians and producers. When we were tied into the Apple environment, it all made sense because it all worked, and everybody who used Logic or whatever, you know, didn't bother them that Logic wasn't available on PC, because there was no reason to shift to PC. But when everybody starts getting their other software packages throttled, or their hardware accelerations throttled, then they are more inclined to shift over to PC. And the only thing keeping them on PC, on Mac right now, is something like Logic. Well, it will get to a point where everybody goes, well, I'm going to have to move to something else. And if they stop the iMac, and if they stop the MacBook, that's probably 90% of Logic users. So all of a sudden they've just lost an entire software platform, which is an entire industry of creative people. And why would those people stick with an iPhone if they have no reason to? So I think that's the bigger picture, and I think they've kind of shot themselves in the foot there, and they kind of have to keep producing these bits of hardware, even if they are not necessarily profitable, because the moment that iceberg starts to tip, we all know what happens. So that is my rant over on Apple. Yeah, so there we go. Unknown artist, Socket, high five. Hey Dom, great AMA this week. Finally I have a question that would help me in my music, and apologies if already answered in previous videos. At what time or for what reason would you create buses when creating a track or when mixing down? I know some people who create buses for every part of their track, for e.g. drums, low-end synths, mid-synths, high-frequency sounding synths, so on and so on. So for me, do I create buses in the initial production? No. No. Yeah, you're right. A lot of people do. A lot of people become obsessed with buses. I think it's probably, if you're doing so I think I have to add in, I need to stipulate first that I separate my production and my mixdown are two very different jobs. I wear my producer's hat to produce a song, and then I wear my mix engineer's hat to mix the song. And the way I go about doing that is by using two entirely different pieces of software. So for example, I'll use Bitwig to produce and write, and all my sound design, everything is done in Bitwig, and I don't worry too much about the mix. Clearly if something's 10 dB too loud, I'm going to bring the gains down, but I don't worry too much about anything like compression or gains or loudness or whatever. I just don't think about that. I kind of, you know, if something's too loud I'll bring it down, if it's too quiet I'll bring it up, obviously, but I just don't worry about that until the end. And then I will do my mix down by bouncing out all the stems, much like if I was to use somebody else's mix engineer. I would bounce out all my stems from Bitwig and then import them into Mixbus, Harrison Mixbus 32C, and I'll do my mix in there. Now, I used to do that in Pro Tools, funnily enough, with tying people into environments and stuff. Pro Tools I got furious with because they never fixed the bugs in, I think it was version 11 or 12, and then they kept offering updates, and to get from, I can't remember the numbers, but I'll make it up now, it was like 12.4, and then that was full of bugs, and then 12.5 you had to pay, I think it was about 300 or something for, which I refused to do because that was a bug fix and it wasn't a major upgrade, and the CEO of Avid had already announced years previously, we will never charge for non-major updates, which is what they did. So I thought, screw you, and moved to Mixbus, which is great. The audio engine in Mixbus and the routing possibilities work perfectly for me. I'm not saying they work perfectly for everyone, but for me and my way of approaching a mixdown, Mixbus works really well. And by definition of the name Mixbus, it's about buses as well, so I find that really convenient, and this is where I get onto the buses. So in Bitwig I don't bother, but if you also mix your project in your same workstation, then it might be more worthwhile for you to start buses from the beginning. But again, personally, I really wouldn't worry about it until the mix stage. I think you have to try and separate those things, and this leads me on to why I separate these things. For me, when I was mixing in the same software as I was producing, I would find myself going, right, this track is done, I'll get onto the mixdown, I'll start changing all the gains and the levels, and then I'll start thinking, oh, that bass line could do with a bit more sub, or actually I'm not happy with that lead line, it's a bit whatever, you know, I'd rather it be a square wave rather than a sawtooth or whatever. And then I'd start going and making changes back in the production, and then I'd forget the mixdown, and every time I tried to do the mixdown I'd become obsessed with the detail in the sound design, or oh, actually maybe I could do with a sweeping effect there. And so I kept going back, and then you're in this eternal struggle of at what point is the production finished and at what point you start the mixdown. Whereas if I separate them on two different pieces of software, I'm able to sit there and go, right, this production is done, listen to it from start to finish, am I happy with it, there are no mistakes, this is done, and then I'll bounce out the stems and away we go, and I'll start the mixdown. And when I'm doing the mixdown purely with stems, I can't adjust that sound design, I can't add in another effects sweep here and there. It becomes annoying to do that. So then after you've kind of, you know, become depressed 15 times in a row, you start to go, right, am I genuinely happy with this production? And you really start to find a line where you think, right, now this is finished. So that helps me move forward. In terms of what I place in buses, I have 5 buses in my most commonly used mixdown session. I will have drums, and on the drums I will sometimes use some compression if I feel it needs it. Usually when I do other people's mixdowns, I tend to feel the need to use some compression then. In my own mixdowns I don't tend to, because I've built the drums from the ground up knowing which bits should work and which bits shouldn't, so I've kind of done that as I've gone. What else? Bass is my second bus, and with bass I will usually have an optional sidechain from the kicks, even though sidechains usually be done in the production stage. I find it's also useful to do it in the mixdown stage, just a really subtle, you know, we're talking like a 1 dB sidechain against the kick, just so that it stops those frequencies clashing too much. And obviously I'll treat those basses. Effects is my third bus, so all my effects will just go through that bus. and then the fourth one is synths. So that is, you know, your chords, your stabs, your leads. Sometimes I might separate those out. It really depends on the track, and any one of these, you know, I might, with the drums bus for example, if there are some super thuddy low end things, I might separate those from the high end things like hi-hats or whatever. So I might have 2 or 3 buses, but it all depends on the track. And then my 5th bus is for vocals or anything along those lines. So all of those really get treated somewhat separately, although they all get treated individually throughout the mix. I will then, once I'm happy with the overall mix levels and I've treated everything as best as I can, then I'll move on to the buses and go, right, relative to the drums, is the bass generally in the right area? Does it need some smoothing out or some compression or whatever it needs? And that's where I start to work on the buses, and then they get summed into the master. And sometimes I'll have, you know, maybe a couple of buses within buses to sum into the master, because I might need something like the bass and the synths to be glued together. So hopefully that answers your question. I think yeah, so the reason, I suppose, so you're saying at what time, I'll say the mix down. Really, I don't really think about buses before the mix down, because there's just no need. You know, when you're producing a track, does your track sound cool? Yes or no? It's as simple as that. If it doesn't, then buses aren't going to help you. If it does, then maybe consider buses. Would it improve it? Probably not. Well, forget about those until you get to the mix down. As for what reason, I think I've probably explained that in my buses, really. I don't tend to create buses in the mixer at all, but if there's a benefit, then I would think about it. It seems to me that if everything is put under a single channel unaffected, then certain elements, transients, are compromised. Yes, so again, it also depends, you know, a lot of people talk about analog summing, and whilst there are some tracks and there are some mixes out there in the world that would definitely benefit from analog summing, those are generally not electronic dance music of any kind of shape and size. So, you know, I kind of always suggest to electronic producers, don't even think about analog summing. It's just not, no one's going to hear the difference, you know, and it's just not something you need to worry about. And similarly, perhaps not as drastically, but similarly with buses in general, either your track sounds good or it doesn't sound good. You know, I don't think there's ever a time where I would say you absolutely have to use buses and separate all your things. I think for me, it makes it just an easier workflow for treatment. Certainly makes sense if you're needing to compress some items and glue them together, things like your drum buses. But again, you know, and I've said in probably hundreds of videos available online time and time again, I've always said, if you think you need to use a compressor on a hi-hat, for example, then you've probably just picked the wrong hi-hat in the first place. So I don't think you really need to worry too much about that. And as you say about transients being compromised, again, if you're compressing or limiting a bus that has a stack of stuff going through it, then, you know, yeah, you're going to be compromising transients from one against the other. As usual, thank you for taking the time to answer. You're welcome. It looks like it's going to be a long one today, although actually I think some of them are just one-liners, so we should be all right. On that note, I'm just going to reset the camera because I'm hitting 25 minutes. And I'm back. So, Outsider Socket, high five. Hi again, Dom, and thanks for another informative video. I have a question this time, and I'm not sure if someone else has asked it, but if they have, I missed it. What were the deciding factors that went into your purchasing the Sub 37 synth? Did you think about buying any of the other available Moogs at the time, like the Little Fatty, etc.? So, for those that don't know, I built a lot of the presets in the Little Fatty, Slim Fatty and Sub 37, so the whole sort of Fatty series. I did a lot of the presets, and then I did some exclusive presets with Chad Jackson and Orbital for the limited edition white Slim Fatty, which I have not in shot. So as for my reasons for going with the Sub 37, I mean, the biggest selling point for me for the Sub 37, other than the obvious Moog oscillators, which just sound beautiful, is the layout. All the parameters you need are there right in front of you, and they're tangible. I can touch and twist those dials and knobs without having to go menu, left, right. I'm not flicking switches, and I find that really frustrating on a lot of synths. Even with the Little Fatty, I've got to admit, and I didn't realise this until the Sub 37 came out, but with the Little Fatty, if you were playing live, for example, and you wanted to move both cut-off and resonance at the same time, you couldn't, because they were on one dial and you had cut-off or resonance for that dial to adjust. Whereas with the Sub 37 you have individual knobs for each function and each parameter. That for me, and I think, you know, I've often said to people on this channel that, you know, when you talk about hardware as a whole, not necessarily analog but hardware, you know, it's an unnecessary advantage, is the fact that you know, you can touch the buttons and dials and use the synth with your hands, and for me that really opens up things, because I like to, with my Sub 37, which features in pretty much everything I do, you know, I like to record one-off sounds, and I like to, if I'm building a melody over time and I need to automate the filter, I won't automate it using the workstation like Bitwig, even though I could very easily. I prefer to just hit the record button and do it by hand, because I feel like it's just a much more natural, expressive way of using a synth. And so that's the fundamental advantage of hardware over software, is the fact that you can really sort of, you're personally interacting with that synth. So yeah, the Sub 37 to me is a no-brainer. I recommend it to anyone and everyone. It is just, for me, it was quite literally a career-changing synth. Not just, but mostly because, you know, the way I interact with that synth is hard to explain, but it's almost like on a personal level I'm able to really, you know, use every parameter I want and dial in a sound so naturally. It means that the workflow process is just more intuitive, I suppose. So yeah, there we go. Did you think about buying any of the other Moogs, like the Little Fatty? Yeah, I have those too. I've got the Slim Fatty and the Little Fatty. Again, all boxed up still because I'm in the temporary studio. So there we go. Have a good weekend. And you. Suresh Manawarna, Socket, high five. Thank you for doing these, and do have a wonderful day. You too. St. Nicholas, oh yeah, dirty synth. That's the Kane Audio synth, hopefully. Rod Marconi, cheers Dom, Socket, high five. St. Nicholas, money can't buy you a soul. That's true. Cake C, hello, hello. St. Nicholas, Socket, high five. Deadmau5, hey Dom, it's me, the Mexican Deadmau5, you're right. Another great AMA. What do you suggest for making social accounts? What to look for? How to properly promote it? And what do you suggest for making your own website to pay someone or to maybe do it yourself? How did you do it? And yeah, Socket, high five. Okay, so there's a few questions in there. What do you suggest for making social accounts? If I'm 100% honest, you're probably asking the wrong person. If you look at my Instagram, for example, in my profile, in my bio bit on my Instagram, you will probably notice it says something along the lines of, if you are here looking for bookings, then get the fuck off my Instagram. I'm a musician, not a photographer. For me, I don't give a flying fuck how many Instagram followers I have. Simple as that. I don't care if it's 20, 20,000, 20 million. It makes no difference to me, because I'm a musician, not a photographer. Instagram should not be my job. I'm going to add to this and offer the flip side to this whole argument at some point as well. But same goes with most social media. You know, all you guys who follow and the subscribers of this channel, and you know, a lot of you guys comment weekly, and I love that. You're the guys that are the important ones to me, because you're the people who interact with me, and that's what social media is all about. I don't think it should be about me going, my new smash hit record is out now and you all have to buy it. If you want to buy it, buy it. If you don't, don't. I'm not going to force you into that. So that's my approach to social media. Now, on the flip side of that, it may also be my most detrimental attitude to my career, because you know, when it comes to things like getting gigs and big bookings and climbing the ranks, you know, there needs to be a lot of hype, and I'm not a hype person. I don't do that. I love my job. I love doing gigs. I love interacting with an audience. I love you know, teasing a crowd with music, and you know, I'm really passionate in doing that. But what I'm not passionate about is overinflating and over bloating my own self-worth. So yeah, however, and this is where it becomes detrimental, is I know that the vast majority of club promoters, they're running a business, and this is the weird thing, is us as musicians, we are a business, but we're first and foremost, I hope, an artist providing art. And club promoters don't really need to consider art as a priority. It's not really always about the music. I know there are some great promoters out there who do genuinely consider music being very important to a club night and to the success, and that's great. I'm not writing everyone off, but there are the vast majority of promoters who see it as strictly a business model, and they want bums on seats or feet on dance floor, i.e. tickets selling. That's their big priority. It is a business at the end of the day. They have a business to run. You know, you can't book a $100,000 DJ and sell tickets for $1. You just, you know, it's not going to work. So whilst I get that, I think unfortunately for the last maybe 5, 6, 7 or 8 years, people have perhaps put a bit too much priority on the numbers, and I have known promoters to get in touch with me, or sometimes my management, and they will say, you know, we're considering you for this gig, it's going to be X, Y and Z, and I'm thinking, wow, that's great, yeah, I'm definitely up for that, you know, here's my price. And I don't overprice, because, you know, there's no point. I don't put my self-worth at that, and I'm always happy to negotiate prices, so long as I'm getting something in return for my output, then I'm fine with that. And then the promoter will come back with, oh, can you let us know how many Instagram followers you have and how many Beatport followers you have and whatever. And I just think, well, hang on, why are you booking me? Are you booking me because you think I'm a good performer, or are you booking me because you think I might be able to sell tickets? Because I'm fairly sure that's your job as a promoter. And so, and I'm old school veteran in music industry. I come from the time where when I was 18, we used to go clubbing to a particular night. Every Friday, for example, the Rock in Bristol put on a night called Bubblegum, and it was amazing. And they would book anyone from Pete Tong, Seb Fontaine, you name it, huge names. But it didn't matter. We didn't really look at the flyers. We weren't going, oh, we'll go there because Pete Tong's playing. We would go there because we knew, we trusted those promoters. Those promoters every Friday night put on a great night. And I think that's kind of been lost. So, man, today is a waffle day, I'm sorry. Going back to social media, I'm not the best person to ask, I suppose, is the answer. So how to properly promote it? You know what? Just put out good content. I think that is really what it's about. I think, you know, if you post... If you look at my Facebook social, right, I can post a link to my track. So I have, I don't know, 12, 13, 14, 15,000 likes on Facebook. If I post a funny meme with a cute cat or dog or something, you know, I can get 100, maybe 200 likes and not have to pay a penny for it, and that's great. If I post a link to my track, it probably only gets shown, and because Facebook shows you those numbers, it's only seen by something like 100 people and only liked by something like 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 people at the most. And Facebook kind of throttles that, and they want you to pay for your posts to be seen, which I think is kind of the wrong way of doing everything, because if you've liked my Facebook page, surely you want updates from me. I shouldn't have to pay to update you with content that I've also created for free. It doesn't make any sense. So the other thing on that as well is yes, you can post a meme and get 1,000 likes, but that doesn't transfer to getting likes on your music. So it really depends on the game you're trying to play. If you just want likes, post memes, do whatever you want. If you want people to appreciate your music, then just post music, because you know, you could get 10,000 new likes in a day on Facebook by posting 100 different memes, but not one of them will buy your music. So I think that's an important thing to consider when it comes to social media. What else did you ask? Making your own website or pay someone? Right, so there's a couple of things here. Paying someone is a good idea if you know someone that can do it well, and if you're not that way inclined. For me, I built my own. I used WordPress, and I ached and pained over WordPress in learning how to use it. I have my own server, and everything is contained on that server with all my emails and everything. So I took the nerdy approach of just doing everything myself and building it myself. It was not fun, and it isn't fun to maintain, to be honest. So I think in hindsight I would have probably been better off paying someone else to do it. However, a friend of mine, Jack, who is an amazing web developer, has just this week launched a new website called Vibecast. Maybe I'll put a link to that in this. I don't know if it's completely open to the public, but I know it's open to invites and stuff at the moment. So if any of you guys want to test it out and have a look, then check out Vibecast. I'll put a link below this video. That is basically the equivalent of what I was doing with WordPress, but just much easier to use. So you sign up, you can use your own domain name and port that over if you want. And I probably will be transferring domkane.com to Vibecast. You can add a page, so for your bio, your images, your videos, your SoundCloud, you can import YouTube or SoundCloud or whatever, so that when you update those, they update on your website. It's super easy to use, looks good. You can choose all your colours, your logos, your social links, everything's in there. It even has things like Google AdWords tracking if those sorts of stats are important to you. There's a whole host of stuff in there, so I definitely recommend, if you want your own website, head to Vibecast, and I'll put the link below this video. And yeah, Socket, high five. That, my friends, is it for today. So hopefully this video will go out on time. It's actually Thursday when I'm recording it because I need to get my car in for the MOT, so wish me luck for that. And that means I've got to put in some new rear bushes, which will be fun. So on that note, for the keyword, the keyword is power flex. So if you have made it this far into the video, I've got to go take my car. You guys deserve a medal for making it this far into the video, and I will see you this time next week. Cheers.